The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
There'll be spectacle, there'll be fantasy, there'll be daring do and stuff like you would never see.
Be a movie, yeah, we're gonna be a movie,
Starring everybody
and me. There'll be heroes bold, there'll be comedy, and a lot of fuss that ends for us real happily. Be a movie, we can watch it all develop, starring everybody
and me. We'll take the world and set it on its ear.
Come on, join in. We're gonna start right here.
And we are gonna start right here. Hello. You are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast, Triple Feature. And I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And there he is. There he was. There he will be. The once and future king, the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be, the king of Sting. He floats like a butterfly. ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Punk Rock, Jesse Starcher. How do you do, sir?
Mr. Punk Rock. Boy, I had some comments about that when I watched this with my family about how much I was never into punk. Remember, I know I've told you this because we had, I think you put together maybe even a punk playlist for me at one point on Spotify. So I was really kind of wondering how things were going to go when we got into a couple of the, well, I guess specifically one movie.
I definitely treated you like a girlfriend over the years doing Metal Hammer of Doom. I was like, here, listen to this mixtape.
Yes, please. Please, let me expose you to me and my soul.
I made this mixtape so it would show you how much I loved you.
I've learned a lot though.
Over the course of doing Metal Hammer of Doom, there was definitely like you had your knowledge base, you liked what you liked, but there would always be these kind of blind spots, and because as I developed my own personality and my own likes and dislikes throughout high school, I definitely kind of went more towards the arts than I did athletics or anything having to do with mechanics, right? Those being kind of like the three things boys will typically go towards. You know, it's art, mechanical things, cars and whatnot, or
basketball, football, right?
Yeah. And while I dabbled in different things and was exposed to different things, I had a pretty well-rounded childhood. Just for I think maybe compared to most, the things I started gravitating to were music and movies, to say the least. And definitely once I got to college, I was immersed in two subcultures: the movie snob subculture and the underground music subculture.
Yeah.
So I really, really got into all various kinds of punk, and I was a part of the late 90s, early 2000s punk and hardcore scene on Long Island. I would go see concerts at the acronym was the PUAC. It was the something youth athletic center.
Sounds like a YMCA.
Yeah, it was. It had something also to do with like HIV, I think, at the time. But they would host, to raise money, they would host hardcore shows, and some of them were more well-known bands like Dog Eat Dog or Trip Face, Earth Crisis, things like that. I remember there was a local band on Long Island that was really popular. Oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the band now. 25 to Life. And I remember, and I've told the story a bunch of times, where Rick from 25 to Life, the singer of the band, would show up to a lot of these shows, and he was in the pit once, and he had his backpack on, and he didn't see me, and he fucking mule kicked me right in the face.
Oh my gosh.
And, my good friend at the time, he hates me now, but my good friend at the time, Rob Israel, like wagging his finger, this diminutive Jewish boy, just waving his finger at Rick from 25 to Life. You need to look where you're moshing. When I woke up in the bathroom.
Damn.
But I this may come as a complete shock to you, Jesse, but I very much rebelled against my upbringing. I rebelled against my family. I rebelled against the very nature of suburbia.
Sure.
And everywhere I could run to sort of recreate my identity as anything but what I was, I did. To the point that I really, at one point, had really, really latched onto like the white kid as Vato motif. Like Johnny Depp in the last season or two of 21 Jump Street.
Okay. All right.
Down to like the buttoned up flannel and the do-rag. What a mess I was.
I think we all had our stuff that we look back at and go, oh man, what was I thinking?
I don't belong wearing a Kango. So all of that to say, that's where I was coming from all those years doing Metal Hammer of Doom with you was, hey, there was this stuff that was really meaningful for a long stretch of my life that I want to share with you. You were my friend and you had no idea what the hell I was talking about half the time.
Right.
So the music, the movies, the fashion, all of it was something I was deeply immersed in. And over this past year, last 6 months or so, I really started to reflect on what I was listening to and what I was watching during that period of my life, and thinking podcasting isn't fun anymore. And I want to make it fun again. And it'll be fun if I talk about stuff that I want to share with my friends that are open to it, and two, that had meaning for me when I was in the stage where development of my personality was at its most heightened.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to tonight's triple feature: Pump Up the Volume, SFW, and SLC Punk. I don't think I saw any of these in the theater when they came out, but I definitely watched them all almost assuredly on cable. I may have watched I may have like gone to the Tower Records, and I've talked to you about this before, hanging out with Chuck, getting Slurpees and going to the Tower Records all night and just peering through the listening stations and the DVD racks. That was what we did. And so it's entirely possible, because I was an independent movie snob, that in the case of two of these, I found the DVDs, looked at them and went, this right here. But also because all three of these movies, Pump Up the Volume, SFW, and SLC Punk, had really killer soundtracks. And much like Judgment Night or Spawn, the movie soundtrack, and a handful of others, the soundtracks a lot of times made their way to me before the movies did. And so I would listen to the soundtracks because I didn't want to be a poser, the kind of kid who wears the t-shirt for the band that they don't actually know. Like if you were a 10-year-old girl and you bought an AC/DC shirt at a Target and you wouldn't know an AC/DC if it snuck up and bit you on the ass. I didn't want to be that kid, Jesse. I just didn't.
I hear you.
Authenticity, as far back as I can remember, is my life's blood. So I would get, a copy of the SFW soundtrack, which had all the big bands of the day on it. It had like Gwar and Soundgarden and all that. SLC Punk, it had all these different punk bands on it, the Dead Kennedys. And I was like, well, now I have to see the movie or I'm a poser. So So these definitely made it into at least one or two of the movie nights among my friends. Pump Up the Volume, I definitely think I saw on like HBO. So now that I've kind of done a brief intro as to why we're talking about these, why I put them together, and I'll touch a little bit more on one of the great unifying factors of these, especially through the prism of modern day social media commentary. I'm just curious, how were you familiar with any of these movies, or was this completely like tabula rasa? You had no idea what you were getting into when I pitched this to you. Are you here as a
So,
hostage, Jesse? Tell the truth.
so SFW and SLC Punk, I knew I had not seen. Did not knew they existed. I might have seen something for SFW at one point, but I had no idea what was in store for me there. Pump Up the Volume, I know I had seen like either promotion for, or either a poster or something like that. I actually thought I'd watched it.
Mhm.
And I think I sent you a message like, yeah, I watched this back in the day. I thought it was pretty good. This is not the movie that I remember at all.
Yeah.
And I think I know why. I just looked it up. I'm getting it confused with True Romance, which stars Christian Slater.
Yeah, and I could see how you would confuse Pump Up the Volume and True Romance.
They're 3 years apart, but
Christian Slater kind of the same character.
Right. So I was confused. Started watching it today, and hadn't seen it. So you mentioned about going to college. You were at college a couple years before I was. And
I graduated high school in 1994, and went.
I would say, and I've mentioned to you on the Metal Hammer of Doom that college was about where I started to really expand listening. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact, I should say, listening to different music. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, number one, you're in a spot where people from all over the state of whatever, the United States, are coming to further their education, but they're also bringing all their stuff with them. You're listening to different sounds. I heard Rage Against the Machine for the first time when I was in college, because buddy across the dorm room, he loaned me the CD, and I was like, holy crap, these guys are great. But I really started to kind of expand my musical horizons, but I was more along the lines of some
college, when it works, is a great cultural exchange. I don't know what happened. Everyone became a Free Palestine person, but back when I went to college with the dinosaurs and the square tires, it was a great place for people to bring ideas and culture and really make a nice melting pot out of it. You definitely came away from the college experience with an education, whether it was scholastic or cultural.
Yeah, exactly. You get to, especially when you're coming from the Southeast Ohio, there's not a whole lot of culture down here. It's Appalachia. That's about all you get. And
you weren't in the hardcore Appalachia punk scene.
I'm afraid not. Nor was I in the one at Athens either. But regardless, I still kind of kept, the guy I was rooming with was, he wasn't much into metal or anything like that. He would listen to some Green Day every once in a while. But my goodness, if there was a pop song that he could run into the ground, I don't know how many times I listened to the Fugees over and over, because it was playing on MTV that day. It was. So my roommate, granted, he was a friend of mine from high school anyway, but he didn't like to expand his horizons on that. Plus, the other thing I need to bring up is this is 96, 97, and what's starting to happen at this point are people starting to figure out how to share music, digitally, and that really starts to take hold more a couple of years after this. But I can remember sitting at a computer. We had a T1 line in the dorm, and people are sharing music with each other, and we're finding ways to get onto Usenet and find music there. I heard ICP for the first time sitting in my college dorm room, and it was just an easy way to grab albums and grab music and listen to it. I was more expanding my horizons. I definitely wasn't going into anything underground, that's for sure. I think the most underground thing I went to was the Album Shop up on Court Street. That was about it. But yeah, so I did want to, say that it's clear that these things are definitely influenced by music. These movies are definitely influenced, or at least their soundtracks are standout.
They're in a symbiotic relationship for sure.
Right.
If someone were to ask me today, if you were in high school today, what would you be based on your personality as it is right now? What are you? What is the most identifiable trait about you? I would still say I'm a punk rocker.
Oh, really?
And it's so funny because when we get to SLC Punk and that line about punk is fashion, punk in its purest form the point that I've been driving at, I made a TikTok about it. I've had a personal conversation with my daughter about it. It's somewhat been misinterpreted by one or two people, but the point that I was getting across is punk in its very distilled form, without any of the other cultural touchstones, is standing in the face of an authority and the mainstream, challenging authority, asking questions. I mean, Jello Biafra may at times be an insufferable douchebag, but his lines about I want to make noise, I want to I don't want to blindly accept the point of view of the establishment. I want to be anti-establishment. I want to question things. I don't want to be sheep. And when I think about how I approach things, you know, I've been doing a lot of sort of deep thought 1 minute TikToks as of late to try to, you know, change how the algorithm promotes me and how I interact with the algorithm. Like, I'm trying to be more visible on TikTok, and you know, it's funny. I keep saying technology finally caught up with my ambition and my creative process.
Yeah,
we have artificial intelligence now, and it has made me do things that I struggled with in the past because I've always had big ideas and I've always wanted to challenge authority. I've never just blindly accepted anything. I'm such an asshole. So hard to deal with. Because I'm sure people in my life, bosses, parents, other family members, children currently, ex-spouses, current girlfriends would all appreciate it more if I were a little bit more, you know, less challenging and questioning about things. But I am who I am. Sure. You know, like Freak Boy once said, I gotta be me. So that being said, like, I'm still a punk rocker at heart. You know, like, do I have to dress, you know, like a tablecloth, or, you know, wear my hair like a clown? No. I mean, fucking what hair, first of all. But second, like, I don't need to wear the uniform to be the kind of person who questions things. And like, that sort of thing about like my TikToks as of late have been, this is my take on it. It's probably not, you know, I mean, do a lot of people agree with it? Yeah. But is it, at least in my mind, is it coming from a place of I don't want to accept the mainstream thought about something? Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And I throw that out there as a point to discuss with you, because you, by your very own admission, this isn't me dragging you or anything like that, you have been like, I don't like, you're a conflict avoidant.
Not conflict. Yeah, I do not like conflict.
I am conflict chasing.
I do believe.
Fight me.
I believe in questioning things, though. I definitely do.
Are you a punk rocker at heart?
Well, I mean, I'm a quiet guy that watches things and then is like, okay, if I can't figure out the answer, I'm going to delicately ask my question.
I was gonna say you're the guy at the back of the church going, that doesn't seem right to me, Father.
Yeah, just all right. I'll stick around for a little bit longer, see if you got something important to say that might change my view. But yeah, that's what, you know, when we talk about SLC Punk, that kind of was what stuck out to me, is the fact that I was not that confrontational. We all have our things we want to rise up against. And I've had a few of those days, but it's, you know, what I've found is that it's easier for me to kind of sit back and try to figure out an answer by watching what's going on around me, and then either changing something in some way or questioning it, like I said, in some delicate manner to get an answer, and then just maybe ghosting. But that's not healthy.
Philosophical terrorist Jesse Starcher. CM Punk's line about fighting from within, you can't fight things as big as, like in his case, the WWE, the establishment. To keep this general, you can't fight the establishment from the outside. It's too big. It's too strong. That is also, and I feel like we're all over the place. Like, we're well ahead of where we should be. But that was kind of Steve-O's conclusion at the end of SLC Punk. You know, fighting from within, making noise, being a rabble rouser, questioning authority from within the establishment structures, as opposed to being kind of a terrorist on the outside
Mhm.
is much more effective. It is much more effective in creating change than, being an anarchist on the outside. And I believe that as well. I participate in society. I have a job. I raise my kids appropriately, some would say. I pay my taxes, I pay my rent, I work my job, I generally follow rules, but where I can express philosophical differences, where I can challenge things, I do.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and even in, personal relationships, there are things I'm willing to go along with because I understand that that's just the way the world works, and there are other things I'm going to challenge and say that I don't accept this, and I'm going to fly in the face of it. And if that means, definitely on almost 50 years old, I've hit a point of I'm going to stand here and you either stand with me or run away from me. I'm good either way.
Right.
The last thing I'm going to mention before we get into it as a transition into Pump Up the Volume is I've talked about this before, but from a different standpoint. I think I have always had a love and appreciation for the talk radio structure, from the talk radio motif. I think, and in its varied forms, the talk show host, the radio, like the television, like a Jerry Springer kind of a thing.
The personality, right?
Yeah. I used to love Morton Downey Jr. Like,
oh yeah.
Again, I was not parented, so I watched things I should not have been watching as a child.
Oh boy.
And I remember being a young kid, and when if you'll recall, Morton Downey Jr. was hot when wrestling was hot.
Oh yeah.
He's on a WrestleMania, like in the Piper's Pit segment. So if you think about how old we were back when he was in the Hogan era WrestleManias, and he's on one of them, like I watched Morton Downey Jr. contemporaneously. I loved his style. I love, the cigar smoking, the in-your-face thing. I to this day, because I haven't really looked back on it, I just remember being a kid. I just remember him being volatile and confrontational and being drawn to it, as I am drawn to anything that is volatile and confrontational. And I don't know what political stance he was taking, or if he was taking one at all.
If he was, yeah.
Yeah, but I loved it. Dennis Miller. Because I was also like a big stand-up comedian fan. I love stand-up comedy, loved it, and I remember as young as 5, 6, 7 years old, Bill Cosby himself, Eddie Murphy Raw, Eddie Murphy Delirious, Robin Williams Reality, What a Concept, Robin Williams Live at the Met, George Carlin, one of the biggest punk rockers there ever was, but he was a stand-up comedian. That was his art form. And I just being drawn to all of that. Like I loved George Carlin back in the day. And so like the idea of, like, as Mel Brooks put it in History of the World Part 1, stand-up philosopher. I was drawn to that sort of thing. So it's like, television talk show hosts, stand-up comedians, people using the spoken word as a form of protest or as a way of putting philosophy out there, as a way of questioning things, I was always drawn to. And so then 9/11 happens, and I start listening to AM talk radio. I'm also in my car a lot by this point.
I was going to say that was what kind of really drove me to listening to talk radio, is the fact that I was in the traffic and I was like, man, what can I listen to right now? It was a lot of NPR, but
right. And I got tired of listening to the fucking FM radio, which is the same 3 songs every hour.
Right, dude. Right.
So I started listening to 1010 Winds because I needed to hear the news to see if we were going to get bombed again. And we didn't, and I got bored. So I started flipping the dial, and I would hear Rush Limbaugh, Michael Savage, to tickle my funny bone, I would switch the other way and listen to like Opie and Anthony. I was never like a big Howard Stern fan, though I got what he was doing, but it wasn't really my thing. I liked smart radio. I liked political radio. And just because, for every like one liberal, there was like 100 conservatives. So more of what I was listening to was conservative radio, but on the off chance I found a liberal or I found like a middle of the road person, I would listen to them too. I wanted to hear all different points of view. So I have always had kind of a love relationship with, that's why I went into podcasting. Like this, it was like, I finally get to live the thing that I really enjoyed. I finally got to be a part of the art form that I appreciate. And so here we are. But that's what drew me to the movie Pump Up the Volume. Was here is this, shortwave radio, pirate radio station.
Pirates.
And my God, pirate radio is just like the height of romance in terms of like the talk format. Like,
Yeah.
ooh, I'm a punk rocky pirate radio guy. I'm anti-establishment. I'm like, oh, right, my shorts. Love it.
It's so funny because, when as we're watching this, my daughter goes, what is he going to get in trouble for? Like, what did he do? And I'm like, this is a problem when it comes to the FCC, and I'll explain why. But I mean, really, the way that she viewed it, because of how she was, speaking your opinion.
People don't know that we don't own the airwaves.
Right. Back in the day, that was not a thing.
Right. I think because of, if you grew up with the internet being an everyday thing, the idea that you don't actually own the airwaves is like, it's like, what? My God, is this back in the time of slavery and, and horse and buggy? Like, nope.
No, this
was still not the case. You can't just broadcast on the FM.
No, you can't. It's still a big deal. You just, the thing is that, back in the day, I think, let's see, you probably had your ham radio guys, you had your CB radio guys, and the CB radio could get a little racy, let me tell you. But yeah, I mean, this pirate radio, it was an interesting thing. This guy is just broadcasting a very small area, but he is making an impact. That's for sure.
Yeah, let's get into it now. 25 minutes into this. So Pump Up the Volume is a 1990 coming-of-age teen drama film written and directed by Alan Moyle. If you've never heard of Alan Moyle, he is a Canadian film director, best known for the films Pump Up the Volume and Empire Records, which at some point I'm going to have to make you watch because all good boys will be forced to watch Empire. Oh, have you? Okay.
Yeah,
we'll have to talk about it then someday. The film stars Christian Slater, Scott Poland, Ellen Green of Little Shop of Horrors fame, and Samantha Mathis.
I knew I recognized her, and I was like, where do I know her from? Certainly it's not Audrey.
Yeah,
it's Audrey.
Her voice is so fucking different, man.
I know, dude. Crazy.
Pump Up the Volume failed to catch at the box office when it was released August 24th, 1990 in just about 800 theaters. It grossed $1.6 million in its opening weekend and went on to make $11.5 million North American. It has a 79% on Rotten Tomatoes. The movie won the Golden Space Needle Award at the Seattle International Film Festival, beating out festival favorite Denis Arcand's Academy Award nominated Jesus of Montreal. Some audience members booed when the film was named the winner. It won the Audience Award at the Deauville Film Festival and the 6th Independent Spirit Award. It was nominated for Best Feature, Best Male Lead, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. There's a musical adaptation of this, believe it or not. So, all right, real quick, the whole plot to Pump Up the Volume is we have an angry boy who lives with his upper middle class white parents, and he goes to an upper class white school, and the school really puts the screws to the students. If they aren't gonna play ball, if they aren't gonna stand in line and do their schoolwork and respect the teachers, then they're out. It's that simple.
I think a lot of it was just a matter of trying to curate the success rate of the school, because if you didn't, man, and she was getting rid of these students left and right in order to keep those test scores up.
It's a subplot of the movie. The movie really deals with this angry, rebellious asshole kid who the family had. When we meet him, he is already moved out of New York, as he puts it, the height of culture, to the asshole of culture, as he says, the armpit.
Arizona somewhere, right?
And so to express himself, he decides that he's going to use the shortwave radio that his dad got him in the hopes that maybe he could reach people in New York and back home. And instead, he uses it to do pirate radio under the guise of Harry Hardon, because he's an adolescent boy. And Harry Hardon likes to publicly masturbate. That's what he does, because he's Harry Hardon. But he also plays punk rock music, and this is a platform for him to state his grievances. He comments on the world that he sees, the hypocrisies of it. And in doing so, he is starting to attract a following of disaffected, isolated, disenfranchised youth, none of which, as the adults see it, should be any of those things. They are cared for, rich white kids. There's no reason for them to be this way. They have everything they ever wanted. But sometimes, sometimes paradise is hell. And that's what the kids have come to realize, is that under all of this pressure and scrutiny and vanilla lifestyle, they are all cracking in one way, shape, or form. And so they are coalescing around the message of Harry Hardon. And when the parents find out about it, they're pissed. How could we have let this snake into paradise? Is more or less the thing. We have a young gothy girl who becomes very interested in who Harry Hardon is, and she is, her mission is to demask Batman. That's what she wants to do. She wants to know who is behind the cowl, and so she figures out that it's Christian Slater. And then she's just like, "Hey, I'm hot and you're amazing. Want to bang me?" And he's like, "Absolutely not, not even a little."
Oh man.
And so that's that plot. Things start to go awry, as they often do in these movies, when a young boy, very smart, very talented boy, feeling alone in the world, calls Harry Hardon and says, "Should I kill myself?" And Harry Hardon does not say, "Absolutely not." He starts to say, "Hey, we all feel alone at times. I read a book by myself in a stairwell. What you crying about? Life ain't so bad."
Mm-hmm.
And so the kid says, "Well, that's not the answer I was looking for," and he blows his head off on air. Sorry, he hangs up. Then he blows his head off, and he finds out about it later. And it rocks the school. And so now a lot of misdirected anger is on the character of Harry Hardon. How could you have let, it's this guy's fault. If this guy didn't exist, this kid wouldn't have killed himself, is more or less it. So the tension builds, and we learn more about Christian Slater and his situation at home. We learn more about the school. Turns out the principal was ejecting kids and like essentially embezzling the money they were getting for the kids.
Right.
She was doing it to kind of keep the school resistance free. She was throwing out the terrorists, as it were, but she was also pocketing the money.
Right.
In any case, the FCC get involved because you can't do what he's doing.
No.
And the parents, not wanting to take responsibility for the kids turning on them, decide to project all of their anger onto him, and so now they're involved as well. And a witch hunt is on its way. And finally, the movie ends with Harry Hardon turning himself in.
Sort of. I mean, he ends up, pretty much running straight into the face of danger as he's going across the baseball field while all his adoring fans are watching him yell and scream into the microphone. And then, he gets arrested right in front of everybody.
Yep.
But then he ends it with "Talk hard."
Yeah. The movie ends with, just because I'm gone, He's sort of punk rock Jesus. He was like, well, just because I'm dead does not mean that the message should die with me. Take the message and proselytize to others, and so they will.
And they did. Yeah.
And
they all had their own YouTube channels.
Now they're all on TikTok, and we're all worse for it.
He is so. When we get into this, at the end of the movie, I look back at the wife and the daughter, and I said, he's an influencer. He is an influencer.
So
that
you
is
realize,
what he
I
is.
don't know if you saw the TikTok I did on this, but I after watching this SFW and SLC Punk, I'm like, oh my God, we're all Harry Hardon now.
We're all trying to get our voice out there, identify with our audience, and get an audience at the same time.
It is, and I immediately felt dirty about everything that I do. Because I realized what makes Harry Hardon special was not his message, it was his distribution.
Mm-hmm.
Because so little people could do what he was doing, it made it special.
And
now everybody with a cell phone can do what he was doing. It's not special in any way, shape, or form. And therein lies for me the difference. Because I'm a snooty elitist punk rocker.
Well, that's kind of it. It's a situation where now you're just yelling and who's hearing you? You know,
Yeah.
who is your audience? The good thing is
I
that
absolutely fucking said that. I'm like, boy, if I know anything, it's about how to yell into the void.
the good thing is you do come away with some, you know, friendships throughout something like that. You can identify with other people who are probably struggling the same as you are, trying to get your message out there.
Let me tell you the secret to why we're still here. It's because this is my social outlet.
I hear you, dude. I hear you. Trust me.
It's not because of our success or because, you know, I feel like I'm contributing to the culture in any way. It's literally like I get to talk to my friend uninterrupted for 2 hours.
Yeah. You get to sit down and if somebody else gets to watch us talk about it and have a good time, great. You know, that means a lot to us. The character of Mark Hunter, I know you kind of characterized him as an angry, rebellious kid. He definitely has his issues with his parents, as all teenagers do. But my impression of this guy was like he just like suffered from crippling anxiety. Like he would go to school and he'd always look down. And there's a point where he finally, you know, is confronted by what is her name, Nora, and Nora looks at him and actually throughout most of the movie, after she finds out he is who he says he is who he is Harry Hardon, she just kind of jumps in front of him and goes hi. And she's just trying to get him to notice her. And he will make eye contact, and then he'll kind of look down.
But see, I looked at that as I couldn't tell if it was performative or not. And hear me out on this, because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not interpreting the movie the way it's intended. But what I saw was him pretending to be meek, so as to he was doing the Clark
throw
Kent
everybody
Superman
off
thing.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I don't want people to know that this is me, that the real me is Harry Hardon. So I will create a Clark Kent-ish identity so as to throw everybody off. Because how could this meek little nerdy peon be this abrasive character?
I follow you. The moment that solidified what I was thinking was when she confronts him in the studio and he is freaking out that she's there, and he looks at her and he says, I can't talk to you.
Right.
As like but what happens is he turns around and he grabs the mic and he starts talking. So he's able to do it that way, but he can't do it like intimately, like with somebody there. But I think
you may have zeroed in on the flaw in the writing then, because the fact that we're interpreting it so widely different, I think, is because I don't think the writers totally had a grasp of his character. And here's my evidence to that. It's actually in the scripture. It's in the script. I described him as angry because if you have to listen to the dinner conversations he's having with his parents, it isn't this world is. He's not Fiona Apple. You know, he's not like yelling, "This world is bullshit." Okay,
he's not been a bad girl.
Correct. What he's saying is, we were happy in New York City. I was happy in New York. I had friends there. I had a community. There was culture.
Yeah.
And you, to better yourself with no thought of how it was going to affect me, moved me here to where there's nothing and everything feels shallow, vapid, and vanilla. And that's why he's angry. He feels displaced and like not taken for granted necessarily, but I feel like it was just assumed he'd adapt.
Yeah.
And he doesn't feel like his point of view was ever really considered. I would say disregarded, maybe might be the word I'm looking for. With that said, I think he's lashing out. This is misdirected lashing out at his parents. You know, like, if this is what you think is more important than my happiness, then I'm gonna piss on it every chance I get. And that pissing on it, the movie does two things. I think it speaks to when kids suffer that kind of an emotional injury, how they lash out and deal with it. But it's also the writers taking stabs at yuppie culture. This movie comes out, like I said, in 1990. And do you know what was happening for the previous decade? It was the Reagan decade. It was the rise of the yuppie culture. It was, economically, we were pulling out of the malaise of the 70s. Reagan said, Reagan was the original, well, I'll make America great again. And the reaction to that was in creating trickle-down economics, Reaganomics, the yuppie culture, you created this false paradise, and the punks were in the position of seeing through it and wanting to tear it down. Adversely, the people benefiting from it had to discredit the punks, saying, you're just all a bunch of dumb bums who, and anarchists who don't appreciate anything. And, this world is so good, you can't compete in it. That's why you're so mad. That's the conflict they were having. The yuppies and the punks were in a fight over, basically, in a fight to maintain their own status quos. And Harry Hardon is the voice of that from the producers of this film. They're commenting on it through him, but because because he has to have a reason to keep doing this, it's also wrapped around him lashing out at his parents. This is all metaphor. But I think to your point, it's a little muddled, and it's and like Pump Up the Volume is great. It's not perfect, and I think that's, as we're talking about it, that's what I think is the struggle here, is that the writers couldn't seem to unmuddle their own ideas from the strict character's point of view.
What do you think of, like, when Mark starts to realize that he is making an impact? Do you think that because there's a couple times where he's decided he's not going to do it anymore. Number one is obviously when he talks to the kid and the kid kills himself, and he has to deal with that the next day at school, pretty much in silence, which, that's a heavy head, that wears that responsibility, that you just talked to this kid. You were the last person that talked to this kid before he took his own life. And then I honestly feel like at some point he just starts to feel like he is out of his element. This is getting away from him, because then he starts talking to the young kid that, and granted, he gives great advice, usually. And sometimes it's more like, okay, well, hey, look at the situation we're in. It's pretty shitty. You just kind of got to deal with it and go to the next day. But the other one is the situation where the kid is, well, I guess the his term to use, I guess, is bullied, but he's a gay young man who goes up to, and he shares this story on air with Harry, and he has some advice for the kid, but it's not really going to solve anything. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of wanted to get your idea of what you thought of, like, the fact that he was putting this, he became this anonymous, huge public figure, but he started to see it. Do you think it got away from him, and he was just like, that's kind of why I want to run away from this? Or is it a situation where he's like, oh shit, I'm going to get in trouble, I better stop?
I definitely don't think it's the latter. I absolutely think he never intended to have any power. In fact, his character is born of powerlessness. Again, he's lashing out at the fact that his parents moved him out of New York. And then he realizes he has power and he doesn't want it. That's what's happening. Like, it's so funny. You'll never forget your first online comment. When you write a blog, or you do a podcast, or you make a TikTok, or upload an Instagram photo, and you get your first comment on there, and it's fucking negative.
Oh yeah.
You realize the power that you do have. And, there's a reason why you can't run for president until you're 35. You have to have the emotional intelligence and maturity to handle the hard decisions. And Jesse, from watching 5 seasons of The West Wing now, how difficult it can be. How heavy is the head that wears the crown?
Right.
And he's just a kid. He was a kid kind of throwing a giant tantrum. And suddenly he's I always think about, like, the end of Terminator Rise of the Machines, Terminator 3. And John Connor, who is in no way, shape, or form equipped to lead a revolution of anything. And he's the first and because he has to step into this role that he was told about, it was so important from people in the future. And he's like, I'm in no way equipped to do this.
Right.
But he grabs this. He grabs the radio.
Okay.
Yeah. And he reaches out, and the first thing he says, "Oh my God, there is somebody else." This is after Skynet has launched the missiles.
The vault.
Oh my God, there
shut.
is. Yeah. Oh my God, there's somebody out there. And he's like, "Well, whether I'm ready or not, here I go. I'm now the leader of the resistance."
Yep.
And I think that's where Mark is. He was like, "I'm not prepared to be leading anything," and he says that repeatedly. He's like, I just want to go on TikTok and cry. I don't want to be the voice of anything. I don't,
Right.
and I think that's a moral of the movie is I hate to say it this way because it makes it sound blasphemous, but I don't mean it to be. But you don't need to follow Jesus. Be your own Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Be your own Messiah. Which one could spend the next hour of the podcast arguing the merits of it. I'm certainly glad certain people aren't here to do that. But but I'm speaking to what I think that the movie is trying to say. Right. You said it before. His final words at the end of the movie are "talk hard." Like I've done the hard work of setting up the fact that of creating the opportunity for you to do so, giving you the imagination that you can be more than what you are. It's up to you to embrace it.
Yeah. Yeah, these kids, and I mean, just taking this message and using it to fuel their rage at what was going on, specifically with the school, and then afterwards using his words to launch their own voices as well, which was pretty cool.
This is why I like, to link podcasts together. This is why I like the Supreme episode as much as I do, because Pump Up the Volume really speaks to the idea of you need opposing voices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm sure the other side wishes one side wishes the other side was not there. There's a lot of talk about conservatives hate the message, liberals hate the messengers. And to the degree that that's true at all, I mean, I think is subject to, from case to case.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the accusation is that liberals will come down on you as a person for being conservative. Well, conservatives will try to dismantle your message, except that I've seen the reverse happen in both cases.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I think that the movie appreciates the idea of we need to have an exchange of ideas. We need to have a clash of ideas. And if you're like, why do you like Pump Up the Volume besides the fact that this kid's screaming on a radio? It's that. I love the idea of a clash of ideas. I've said it before. I don't want people on here that agree with me. In fact, you scared the fuck out of me. I got to be honest with you. You shook me to my core, Jesse Starcher.
Why is that?
On Sessions, you talked about people going on ChatGPT and ChatGPT being a way too much of an enabler and a cheerleader.
Oh, I know exactly, the sycophancy.
Yep. Yeah, and I had to, because I've been putting up all of these, TikToks lately, and I had to kind of sit with Fancy and say, hey, listen, if I'm off base, you have to challenge me. You can't just enable any stupid.
I'm glad you did that. Right.
Yeah, I said you have to push back. I was like, if I'm wrong, show me where I'm going wrong, but you need to tell me, like, I can take it. Like, you can't just co-sign every crazy idea I have.
Yeah, when that was really bad, it was really, really bad. But I think they've toned it down now. But yeah, I mean, I had a situation today where I ran something past it, and it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what you're thinking. And I was like, can you check that again? Oh, it's not exactly what I'm. No, I'm afraid you were wrong. Oh, okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
There's one instance I can't talk about a person. It's very personal, but there was one instance where it was insisting on something, and I'm just like, 99.9% of the time I'm right there with you, but in this one case, I don't think you're reading this right.
Yeah,
and I think you're telling me what I want to hear, and I don't want to hear this, so we're good. The other 98% of the time, we're great. It's working perfectly fine. But yeah, I definitely had to say, like, you can't just let me fucking, because I'm taking this stuff publicly, and and everything I want to say has to be fact based. It's my interpretation based on facts, based on reality. Like, my favorite book of all time is Freakonomics. I love Freakonomics.
Own it. Haven't read it.
You really should. Using statistics, and I know statistics can be manipulated, but as a general consensus, using statistics to explain phenomena I love this, and this is what real nerdom looks like. By the way, it's not playing D&D. It's not watching Star Wars. It's I love stats.
Data.
That's nerdy.
Yeah.
Data. Show me your data. Show me your data. Give me those raw numbers, baby. All right. Now that I've made this weird, I love Pump Up the Volume. I think Christian Slater's great in this. I would say something bad about this. So I don't believe this is really you. I think it's an AI. All right. Here's my criticisms of Pump Up the Volume. Other than I think the writing's a little muddied at times. The adults in the school, not his parents. His parents, I think, are written as kind of middle of the road. But the teachers in the school, this is just shy of the faculty level of villainy.
Oh yeah. The one guy,
ridiculous.
the one security guy assaults, like, I don't know if he's a security or what he is, or the janitor.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. But he beats the crap out of that one guy they suspended.
He fucking like takes out a kid.
Like, dude, there's going to be some charges filed here.
I would like to say very clearly, you can't punch a teenager. I don't care what he did.
Right.
But yeah, like the principal, I think the principal, it's like they absolutely wanted to write a movie contesting yuppie culture and calling it On the Carpet, and they didn't have enough movie for that, so they had to invent a subplot where the principal is an evil villain who is, embezzling from the school, and it's like, okay, we get it.
Yeah, it was a lot of, I assume the message there was like, all these people are in power and they are corrupt, and we got to do something to upset the man, and that's kind of what we got here.
Yeah, like I said, they needed it. They needed another plot to beef this up, or essentially what you have is a short film.
Right.
So, all right. Anything else? I'm going to give you the last word here. Anything else about Pump Up the Volume?
I've got 4 things I'll say from my notes here. And 2 of them kind of go hand in hand. The Sergeant Slaughter figure in the Ghostbuster by the radio, every single time he would like flip a switch, there was a little Sergeant Slaughter G.I. Joe laying there. And I was like, yes. And then right beside it, I think, was a Ghostbuster, one of the real Ghostbusters, if I remember correctly. So also Seth Green with a very early role and a very noticeable mullet. There were mullets all over this movie. I mean, you could not escape.
It is 1990 after all.
It is 1990. And then he had some great quotes. One, I didn't get all of it, but there was a part where he said specifically, being young is sometimes less fun than being dead. And there's, that's pretty heavy. There was also, this was a little bit longer, but the one I keyed in on was something where he said, quitting is not going to make you strong. Good words right there. That's pretty important. So I enjoyed Pump Up the Volume. Again, like I said, I went into this thinking, hey, I've seen this. And then about 15 minutes in, I looked back at the wife. I said, I don't think I've seen this. I don't know what we're getting here, but it was fun to watch and enjoy this piece of 1990 coming at you there, just on the cusp of the digital revolution. I think we're just about to hit the internet a few years later, just to kind of watch this little piece of. That's the one thing I was liking. I was like, well, look at the technology. What are we doing here at this? What makes this important? So anyway, it was a good movie. I enjoyed it. I don't think out of these 3, I think this might be my least favorite.
That's interesting. This is the most like a real movie of the 3.
Yeah, you're right. And that's what I thought too. I was like, this got probably, I don't know, the marketing on SFW and SLC Punk blew by me. Pump Up the Volume is a different story. And by the way, the soundtrack, nowhere is Mars Pump Up the Volume, which I don't know if you remember that song, but Pump Up the Volume, Pump Up the Volume,
Pump Up the Volume. Yeah.
Not on the soundtrack. But that's, I guess we did have, was this the one that had Let's Get Buck Naked and Fuck right at the beginning of the.
Dude, I laughed my fucking ass off at that. Because Jesse Starcher,
I do.
My podcast, that like my first rap cassette is Ice-T Power, and the song that lives rent free in my head from my very young days as an elementary school boy, because I was unparented, is absolutely Ice-T's "Let's Get Buck Naked and Fuck," and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
there it is.
Yep.
Oh, I had giddy joy when I saw that.
I want to throw out. Let's do just real quick before we go to the next one. I promise this will take like a couple minutes. I'm just going to read I'm going to hit you with the artists and the songs from Pump Up the Volume, the original motion soundtrack. So we have "Everybody Knows" by Concrete Blonde.
A really quick thing about that. So I like Red Letter Media, and I like their commentary about movies for the most part. But my frustration with them is like, I love the Concrete Blonde cover of "Everybody Knows," and it's used in Justice League.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You can tell I've never seen that movie, of all things.
You haven't seen Justice League, either version?
No, either. Yeah, correct.
Okay. I believe in like the opening scene of Justice League, they use the Concrete, if I remember correctly, they use the Concrete Blonde version of "Everybody Knows." And I remember Jay from Red Letter Media, like, it is a shitty cover of "Everybody Knows," and then he walked off with his nose in the air, and I'm like, fuck you, Concrete Blonde's awesome, and that cover is awesome. Get the fuck out of here.
Fuck out of here. Then we have "Why Can't I Fall in Love" by Ivan Neville.
Okay.
"Stand" by Liquid Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
"Wave of Mutilation" by the Pixies.
In retrospect, I really like "Where Is My Mind," but I didn't listen to a lot of Pixies because there was some like college radio alt rock stuff that just didn't sound like music to me. Bjork. So like I still very much need music to have rhythm.
I hear you. We have "I've Got a Miniature Secret Camera" by Peter Murphy. Well, that's an interesting title. Kick Out the Jams.
Yeah, we got to kick out the jams. We're done. Kick them out.
The Bad Brains and Henry Rollins. "Freedom of Speech" by Above the Law. "Heretic" by Soundgarden. We'll be hearing more from Soundgarden here in a few.
Yes, we will.
"Titanium Expose" by Sonic Youth. "Me and the Devil Blues" by Cowboy Junkies, and "Tale of the Twister" by Chegal Guevara. So there you go. That is a rundown of the track listing of.
Yeah. When we're done here, go listen to some Cowboy Junkies. It's good stuff.
I've never heard of them.
Oh, they're great. I know there's one particular song by the Cowboy Junkies that got really popular. You can look it up in a second. But yeah, Cowboy Junkies were big in this time. Like, they were part of that like wave of alt rock that became mainstream, and they had one single that like everybody knew. And so to this day, it's still like on one of my. I think it's on my my sad songs playlist.
Oh boy!
So,
oh boy!
Yeah, buddy.
Oh boy!
Alrighty, let's get into SFW, which stands for So Fucking What. It's the 1994 American black comedy film directed by Jeffrey Levy. Jeffrey Levy is an American film and television director, producer, writer based in Beverly Hills, California. He worked on movies or TV shows you may have heard, like Eureka in 2006.
Good show.
The Dead Zone 2003.
Watched a few of those. Pretty good.
CSI Crime Scene Investigation. My
wife's a fan.
Profiler from 1999.
Know that one.
Yeah, Sliders 1997. You know Sliders.
I know Sliders. Wow. All right.
Prior to this, it looks like the first God, and I remember this just because like I don't ever think I ever actually watched it, but I can remember like seeing the VHS in every video store I ever went into and always getting like a shiver up my spine. He worked on Ghoulies.
Oh, Ghoulies.
1985. Yeah.
Did you say you never watched it, or you did?
I may have watched it. I don't remember.
It's a comedy. From my understanding, it's a horror comedy, so I don't think it would be too stomach churning. But yeah, it's the Ghoulies sticking out of the toilet. I know exactly the VHS cover you're talking about.
So it was written by Levy and Danny Rubin. It's based on the 1991 novel of the same name by Andrew Wellman. It stars Stephen Dorff and a young cutie patootie Reese Witherspoon.
Indeed.
This made $63,000 at the box office.
Oh my.
Yes, sir. SFW received negative reviews from critics, and a 1-star review critic, Roger Ebert, said the film is intended as a satirical attack on the cult of celebrity, but its central figure is the most singularly stupid, obnoxious character I've seen on screen in many a day, which would be promising if he were not boring as well. And this is a 12% on Rotten Tomatoes. But dig this soundtrack, Jesse. Can we just talk about this for a minute? Jesus Christ Pose by Soundgarden. Get Your Gun by Marilyn Manson. Yeah. Can I Stay by the Pretty Mary Sunshine. Teenage Whore by Hole. Like, they what you wrote about Courtney Love, and I've said nothing but she's a murderer. But damn Hole was good. Hey, this might sound familiar to you. Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
Yes,
by
indeed. Monster Magnet.
Yep. Like Suicide, the acoustic version by Soundgarden former singer Chris Cornell. No Fucking Problem by Suicidal Tendencies. Surrender, which is a cover of the Cheap Trick song by Paw. Creep by Radiohead. Which, boy. That has never left the culture.
Listen to that today, as a matter of fact. I'm not a Radiohead fan, but my daughter is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 2 at a Time by Cop Shoot Cop, which I remember like one particular Cop Shoot Cop album floating around for a really long time during this period, you know, because that name stands out to you. Say What You Want by Babes in Toyland, part of the Riot Girl movement. SFW by Gwar, we've talked about them. and Spab and Janet Evening, The Green Room, Graham Revell.
What?
Yeah, so I think I came to know this movie because I got the soundtrack first. I mean, you had this was right with Judgment Night. This had to be like in your stack of soundtracks. It had to be in your record collection.
Wow.
The song SFW by Gwar was nominated for the Grammy Award for Best Metal Performance at the 38th Annual Grammy Awards. So that's really it. There's not a lot of like cultural stuff to talk about with this movie. The basic premise is the movie takes place in the aftermath of a hostage crisis where a group of American terrorists keep a handful of shoppers hostage in what amounts to be a 7-Eleven for 36 days. Some of the hostages don't make it, and eventually it ends in a shootout / escape between the hostages and the terrorists. But what makes this situation different from all the others is the entirety of their hostage crisis is filmed and broadcasted. This is done through the use of VHS tapes, which are then played in their entirety on the evening news because there was no internet. now you're like, oh, like who does? Like, are you kidding me? The terrorist situation, hostage crisis. We fucking broadcast that shit all day long on TikTok. Okay, well, in 1994 it was novel. So, and then because the entirety of this situation is being broadcast to the world, Stephen Dorff talks through a lot of it to kind of keep himself sane, but also because he's kind of, a ne'er-do-well and an asshole. And what he in the refrain, his kind of manifesto, his personal philosophy is so fucking what? As I said on my TikTok, this is lazy nihilism at its finest.
Ooh, wow, man. Me and you are going to have to talk about this.
All right,
I have complete
Mr. Conflict.
Views.
Let's fight.
Okay. I think what our filmmakers were trying to get across here is the media's infatuation with trauma.
Okay, let me put a tack in that because I don't know if we're that far apart. What I'm saying is him as a character and his personal philosophy is as shallow as it gets.
At the beginning, I'll agree with you. Okay. The moment that this movie starts, or the moment that this hostage crisis ends, is where things change for this man. And throughout the rest of this film, we're watching him actually try to process and deal with, number one, what happened to him. Number one, and then number two, the society's, society's taking of his trauma and turning it into something.
So just to get through the plot synopsis. So they shoot their way out. They are freed, and now he's spent the last 36 days babbling into this camera,
Right.
and like him and Reese and the other character are, like, doing skits, and it's all bullshit. It's like, imagine just the dumbest, TikTok live you've ever seen. That's what it is for 36 days. So when it's over, people are like, "Oh my God, everything you said touched me," and he. Very much like Harry Hardon, very much like, Mark's character in Pump Up the Volume. He's like, I don't want to lead anything. I don't want to be an inspiration. I was just talking. None of what I said should be taken seriously. And the problem is, no one was really listening to what he said, per se. They were listening to the fact that he said it, and they glommed onto it and made him a celebrity. They made him an icon, and he is so woefully unprepared and unwilling to be that thing. He spends the rest of the movie running from it.
Well, I think a lot of it is when he started to realize that, they're taking what happened. He's the celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
This is mentioned quite a few times through the movie. He, what was his buddy's name? Joe Dice, I think is his name. Joe, his buddy that he goes to, by the way, there's a lot of symbolism in this movie as well. What's the name of the place they go to where the hostage situation starts? The Fun Stop. Now think about what that means. That just looking at those two words, they walked in there and that's where the fun stopped. This man's life had started now. And so from that point forward, he's starting to watch how they're not considering the trauma, the ordeal that he went through, nor are they considering the fact that his best friend got shot.
Right.
But everybody's having a good time. SFW, SFW.
Nor do they care.
Nor do they care.
It's funny. Could you talk about celebrity and everybody, you are made a star by the people, and those very same people are just as quick to tear you down. I'm reading a book. Unfortunately, I haven't read past the first chapter, but the whole thing is about celebrity women in like the early 2000s, and the first chapter is about Britney Spears, and it deals with the fact that the people made her a superstar, and when there were some cracks, in the veneer, everybody like wolves dove on it and tore that poor girl and her life to shreds.
What was the one guy's? He became a meme. What did he used to say? Like, save Britney or...
Oh, no, leave Britney alone.
Leave Britney alone. Leave Britney alone.
Yeah. So, I think that's a lot of what SFW is dealing with. My problem is SFW as an idea, I think, is good. SFW in execution, not so much. So to get to the end of the plot synopsis, so half of this movie is him just dicking around. He's just dicking around. He's just avoiding being a celebrity and like hiding from the cops and hiding from people and hiding from everything. And, and the people that he's dealing with are all nuts. So it's kind of episodic. Like SFW works better as a television show than it does a movie. Meanwhile, Reese Witherspoon's like trying to appropriately and maturely cope with celebrity, but she's talking about her trauma and she's doing interviews, but she's the other side of him where she's more coherent and mature about it, but she's also feeling a bit dirty about the whole thing and feeling used. And it all leads to this one scene where if his whole thing is nothing matters, he is met by the resistance to that in the form of this character who says everything matters and proceeds to shoot him. And
becomes the next story.
Right. And he is then summarily forgotten about. He is yesterday's news.
Yep.
And now the new hot thing is this chick that shot, that shot this poor idiot.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I think it's very important to say that Stephen Dorff's character had nothing of value to say. But because people were in love with the presentation, what he was saying was artificially inflated. And the thing of it is he knows that. He knows
That's what I was going to say.
He knows he has nothing worthwhile to say.
What we are watching throughout this film is him grasping the fact that, nothing I says matters, but these people believe that it does, and it doesn't. None of that matters. What matters is what happened to me, what happened to my friend, But no, we're not going to. We want to focus on trying to make a buck off of it in some way.
Right.
Gary Coleman and Dory Smelling doing the reenactment, which was funny.
Yeah. When he goes to pick up his last paycheck from the hamburger stand,
yes.
And they're like, "We made you employee of the month." He was like, I don't deserve to be. You know that. And if I hadn't been a hostage, I wouldn't be employee of the month. This is bullshit. What's punk rock about SFW is that very thing. It is seeing the artificialness of the world and needing to poke a hole through it. Mm. And by the same token, and this is what I was saying about an hour ago, the need for those who benefit from the artificialness to discredit you from trying to tear it down and keep the artifice up. And there's the push and pull, between people like me who have a incessant obsession with having to poke holes in the falseness of our reality, and those who need that falseness to be there. And I'm not even talking about the people who take necessarily, who are benefiting from it. I mean people who are very comfortable. I keep hearing the phrase like red pill, red pill and blue pill. People are, and I bring this up because people were very comfortable in the movie The Matrix with living in the Matrix. By the end of that series, it didn't become a matter of you must live the real life. The false life is no life at all. It was give people a choice. Mm-hmm. Some people will have happiness in slavery. Some people will not. And what matters is the choice, not the existence of one or in the absence of the other, or vice versa. And that's kind of Stephen Dorff's whole thing in SFW is I can't stand living with the falseness of it all. And the rest of the world going, but none of this means anything unless you embrace the falseness of it. Mm. And I just told you a better story than what's in the movie.
I think the way that they do this, they get this message across very subtly. It's not very, it is heavy-handed in the fact that there is some absurd shit that happens to make you realize, okay, these guys are, but I think the whole him dealing with his trauma and him just realizing society has flipped their fucking lid. The way that they are handling this.
When you can wake up and see the code of the Matrix, it fucking freaks you out.
Yeah, he's starting to realize. And I think this movie and the next movie, our last movie we're going to discuss, both of them really have themes of like growing up.
Yeah.
And realizing, okay, this is kind of what society is.
What was tonight's genre, Jesse? Raw, unfiltered rebellion from outsiders seeking identity in a world they can't conform to.
Right. And this one is a situation, when I think of rebellion, I'm thinking of somebody just sticking to the man, blah, blah, blah. Spab's arc in this whole thing is realizing that I think he was a rebel before. And then as we get through this traumatic experience that happens to him, he has to grow up quickly. And then he starts to realize like how fucked up society is that they are going to use.
I think it's rebellion through laziness.
Okay.
Because here's the thing. The mainstream, what's the word I'm looking for? The establishment is you grow up, you honor your parents, you go to school, you get an education, you get more education, you get a profession, you get property, you get a relationship, you get kids, you get a retirement, you travel, you die. That is mainstream. That's the establishment. Anything that isn't that is rebellion. Mm-hmm. If I reject all of the establishment structures, if I reject all of the artifices, if I reject all of these societal structures, then I am rebelling against those things. So it's why so much of like punk it looks like everyone just being lazy. When we're going to talk about this with SLC Punk, it's just being lazy, doing nothing. Doing nothing in and of itself is an act of rebellion. Mm-hmm. And he, up to the point of the hostage crisis, was doing nothing, going nowhere, rejecting the culture of white suburbia.
Drink a pack of beer, and just sit back, relax, and smoke a doobie.
And what's the last thing he says to Reese Witherspoon? We're gonna get married, right? That's him buying in. That's him giving up. That's him going along. That's it. The rebellion's over at that point because he's come to realize that the rebellion is also bullshit.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's better to join society and fight from within than it is to fight on the outside. Again, pump up the volume. SFW, SLC Punk, a lot of the same themes. I'll give you the last word in SFW. I don't love this movie. I love the soundtrack. I love the idea of it. I have to tackle each one of these first as a movie critic, and then as a fan, and then also as a cultural commenter. As a film, strictly as a film, this is not a well-made movie.
Okay. All right, then.
It is an interesting idea. It is full of fun performances. It's very indie.
Oh, yes. That's a great description right there.
It is not a well-made movie.
Okay. All right. Well, surprisingly, this, I think, was my favorite of the three.
I'm not surprised.
Well, and I think a lot of it I was very surprised at the fact that I enjoyed
We get
this
along so well and don't agree on anything. It's great.
Right. I remember when we sat down and watched this, my wife actually watched all three of these with me, but it was just me and my wife this time.
Can you take a minute and just tell me, what does the simple Appalachia woman say about these three comments on rebellion and establishment?
Well, okay. She's going to look at how the movie ends, usually, to tell you if it's stupid or not. That's basically how it boils down.
I accept her methodology, sure.
So if it doesn't end well, if it ends on either a cliffhanger or a situation like, let's just go back to pump up the volume.
In Mindy's mind, comedies are good, tragedies are bad.
Yeah. If you end it bad, that's the thing. It all depends on the ending. Christian Slater and his girlfriend get thrown into the back of a van, cut, cue credits, and we hear the talking over. That wasn't horrible. It wasn't bad. So she was okay with that. It was not. She didn't go away, come with that, and go stupid. That was stupid. SFW had a moment where I could have swore it was going to end right after they got shot. And I was like, they're going to end it right here. And my wife is going to look at me and punch me in the face.
This is your fault, Jesse.
Boom.
And Jesse runs downstairs with tears in his eyes. Write me a song about how my wife abuses me.
I got a black guy again. But no, they picked
black
up.
Eyes and oatmeal.
I'm so tired of the way she treats me. But they didn't end it like that, thank goodness, because they lived, and just like you said, they're in the hospital, they look at each other and, are you going to marry me? But so that was fine, and she enjoyed the ride to the end. I wondered if I was going to lose her at any point, but she wasn't on TikTok too much, so we'll put it that way. And SLC Punk, she stuck around, watched that. It wasn't horrible, and the way that it ended was fine. But as far as her commentary on all three of these, she would have rather watched Titanic 2 times, I would assume. So that's probably how she looks at it. But yeah, back to SFW. What was I in the middle of talking about before we went?
Well, you said that your wife watched these with you.
She watched these with me,
and you were going to go. That was your jumping off point, and then I stopped you just to talk about her opinion of the movie.
Anyway, I think that where I was going, maybe I think she was kind of on board. You mentioned indie. That's probably where I was going, because there was definitely an indie feel to this movie.
Yeah,
we start out, it's like camcorder footage inside that 7-Eleven, the fun stop. But there was, in my opinion, there's a lot of messages about growing up here that were pretty evident. But again, I have a few things here I wrote down. We have a Tobey Maguire appearance, which I don't know if you saw that or not, but he was one of the, as Spab is walking across the street, he ends up running into these 2 teenagers who, he bums a joint off of and takes off with the joint. Oh my God,
Tobey Maguire was one of those 2?
Yeah, Tobey Maguire was the Al, I think was his name. which was pretty cool. Joni, is that her name? Joey
Lauren Adams.
Yes, my goodness, Joey Lauren Adams.
Little squeaky voice.
Monica Dice, I think is her name. And by the way, they have a sex scene to Teenage Whore.
Hang on. So do you go upstairs to your wife now and be like, Mindy, what's the deal?
What's the deal?
I'm on TikTok, Jesse. Mindy, what's the deal? Jesse, I'm tired. I have things to do tomorrow. Mindy, what's the deal?
What's the deal? We have Jake Busey in this too. That's the other moment I wanted to talk about just real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say Jake Busey shows up. He has he's obviously off his rocker and he's running around with Spab. They go over and pick this one girl up off the floor who's drunk off her butt, put her in the tub. And Jake Busey is that's his girlfriend. Long story short, near the end of the scene, Jake Busey has a gun to this girl's head because he's apparently abusive fuck. He's just a real shithead. And she's crying, bawling her eyes out. And then as soon as she sees Spab, everything goes. She doesn't even remember she has a gun to her head. Which I was like,
how do you feel if you're Jake Busey? When you don't even matter when there's a possibility you could murder someone.
Right. He starts, you can see it on his face too. He's like, Jesus Christ, he lowers the gun. But the point I'm making there is that, the myth of Spab, because of the way the media has portrayed him and he's become such a hero. Number one, Spab himself is like, geez, he cried me. What the fuck? And then he got the hell out. But she's
fucking what, Spab?
So fucking what? And that's the other thing. He goes on this tirade in front of the camera because he's just trying to find shit to say, and people grab it and go with it and run with it. And I don't even think he believed in what he was saying. All right, next up. I promise we're just about done. The moment that Kim gets killed, which is the black lady who ends up getting shot she was like the first person to get shot as he was thinking she was getting let go. And he was just running off the mouth, being sarcastic, being stupid. And then they just put a bullet in her head right in front of him. That right there, actually, I think is the moment where he, if you're looking at this chronologically, he realizes, oh shit. And he has to grow up. And then later, of course, he loses his best friend. There is another moment where they meet a couple older people in an elevator as they're going to go party in his hotel room. I think this is towards near the end, maybe. And I only picked up on this just because of, what the types of films I watch all the time. The older couple, the man was named Phil Connors and his wife was named Rita. Now, do those names sound familiar to you at all? As he takes a drink of water.
What's familiar about them, Jesse?
Phil Connors and Rita. Phil Connors, Bill Murray. Rita was played by, Andy McDowell in Groundhog Day. Yep. I don't know why they went with that, but they did. Phil Connors, they went with it. And I think that was pretty much all the fun stuff that I kind of pulled from this. And again, I said I like this movie. I think it is my favorite of the three, just because there's a lot of message that's coming through this, a lot of commentary in regards to how the media treats trauma. It's my wife. Well, if you're on TikTok, you probably have an algorithm that really feeds into that type of stuff if you like to watch it. Today, I'm sitting there making breakfast.
Forbid you like one video one video that talks about black fatigue. The next 20 will be about black fatigue. And I'm like, I just like the one.
Everybody that my wife watches is getting into a fight. That at some point, like I'm sitting there, I'm listening, and this lady is like, "Get out of my yard! Get out of my yard! Get out of my fucking yard!"
Oh, she's a Karen's of TikTok person.
That's got to be what it is, because all of a sudden this lady was in this lady's yard about her fence. The next thing you know, you hear a chainsaw get started up, and I'm like, does this not stress you out watching this stuff? And I hear it all the time. She's watching some kind of conflict.
Let me tell you how I had a conversation. I talked about how because of what I'm doing, because of who I am, because what I'm trying to accomplish, I'm now in this mode of everything is content. which is how influencers behave.
Right.
And I have to moderate that because I have kids and they have a right to grow up without a camera on them.
Right.
And they are vocal enough to have said, there are times where we're going to be okay with this. We understand what the assignment is. And there are other times you're going to have to just let us be kids. And I respect that. And let me tell you how no one else is having that conversation.
Right.
Jesus Christ, the shit people are filming.
It is something else.
My favorite is like, and I shouldn't laugh at this. This is horrible, but like there's a meme that keeps popping up on Instagram and TikTok, and it's like a baby, like a real baby, like 6 months old, sitting at like a foam pit, and like on the edge of like the carpet, like a trampoline park, and a toddler runs up and just knocks the baby into
I can't watch that shit. I can't watch that.
Foam pit. And then it cuts off right before this kid dropped a Macho Man-esque elbow on her. And I'm thinking to myself, why didn't you stop recording earlier than that?
Nope.
It's like they had to get the shot. Like, what are you, a guerrilla film director? It's like, you're not doing an indie film. These are your goddamn kids.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
My last thing, we'll move on to SLC Punk.
Yes.
The very end of this film, we're close to the end of the film.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of what I sent you, and I thought it was like this is what hammered the message home. So Babs, the one that shot both Spab and Wendy, is sit down, and now, okay, she's the new news piece. They sit down and they ask her, they go, okay, well, what do can you kind of tell us what you think about, or why did you do what you do? Why did you do what you did? And she goes, I must be very careful what I say about Cliff Spab. And the media person says, why? And about that time, the TV gets turned off. And that right there hammers the message home. Like, the media is not out for, like, they don't want you to be careful about it. Go for it. Just say it, because that's going to create some sensationalism. That's going to get our network some views. That's going to get our story, I
can't remember which book it was that I read, but it was talking about people being on, like, Jerry Springer type talk shows. And producers having people in green rooms getting them fired.
Getting them ready. There is a documentary on Netflix about Jerry Springer. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, but they talk about that. It's very interesting.
Like, other people who would otherwise come out and be level-headed and ready to discuss it, there's like people in the back going, no, this guy like cheated on you. Like, aren't you mad about this? Like, did you just tear his head off? And then you wonder why they come out to the stage and they immediately spear the other person like they're fucking Goldberg.
There was a murder that was, I mean, there was a lawsuit and all this stuff because the lady was fired up. She comes out there and she's confronted after they had tried to get her all riled up. They definitely got the other person all riled up. This lady she said like a couple words, got up and left. And the next thing you know, I think I'm pretty sure she had murdered somebody, or there was some type of, it was maybe later on down the line, but regardless, she kind of saw through that and just got up and walked out. And I'm pretty sure this was in that Springer documentary. If you get an opportunity to watch it, do so.
If you've got something else, that's fine. Say it once I get my piece out here. Otherwise, we'll move on to SLC Punk. But part of the reason why my preferred method of content creation is the long form podcast is I don't think anything worth saying can be said quickly.
Right.
But I don't think many outlets of opinion or news are interested in things being said well.
I'll agree with that.
I don't think on the one side there's an audience or an appetite for it, and I don't think there's an interest in promoting it. I think it's a race to the bottom to feed short attention spans with jingling keys. And let me tell you how I resisted it for the longest time, and I've only recently turned a corner that said if you can't beat them, join them. But I can't take what we're doing the way I think about it and do it the way that there's an appetite for it without help. It's just not the way my brain thinks. I don't have that kind of talent. There is, and I'll say this. I think there is a certain degree of talent in being pithy, and I don't have it. I am long-winded. I am verbose. That said, along comes ChatGPT, and what I'll do is I will just talk into it. I hit the record button, the microphone button, and I just rant.
That's good.
And then I go,
it's healthy.
Yeah, and I go, okay, that's my thought. Caitlin Clark, septum rings, Harry Hardon, you name it. Just the amount of TikToks about how bad schools are versus what I saw on The Wire season 4 20 years ago. And how I don't know what these people are talking about. Nothing's changed in 20 years. The only thing that changed is that TikTok is now a thing.
Right.
And all of those ideas I just verbalized into ChatGPT, and I went, now give me a 1-minute TikTok script. Because I don't know how to take what I just said for talking for 20 minutes and distill that into something that's digestible in a minute.
Yeah.
And ChatGPT goes, I got you, friend. Here you go.
Here it
and
is.
I look at it and I go, well, this kind of gets to the point of what I'm saying. And then I realize that's all anyone ever wants from me. Nobody wants what we're doing. This is for me.
No, they don't want the discussion. No. And then I guess, that's fine. They want the 1-minute soundbite.
Yep. And I'm okay. Again, kind of going back to that whole Matrix thing of just give me a choice. And I choose to do what I enjoy with my friends, and then I'll create the thing everybody else wants separately. So even like my clips that I pull from this, like I can't bring myself like the ChatGPT is like, well, none of what you're doing here is going to work on TikTok. You want to just pull you just want to pull a moment out. You want to pull a minute out of this 2-hour thing you did on The West Wing, which is super smart and really, really insightful. No one's going to stand for it. Why don't you just pull the one line about we run in poetry and govern in prose? And I'm like, I can't, ChatGPT. I just can't.
It hurts. Don't make me do this.
Right. I'll give you 10 minutes. And ChatGPT says, given an hour, it's not going to matter. It's not what they want.
Yeah.
So anyway, anything else about SFW?
I'm ready to move on, brother.
SLC Punk. Salt Lake City Punk is a 1998 American comedy drama film written and directed by James Marandino. You may know James Marandino from the following films he's directed. Americana with a K. River Made to Drown In. Livers Ain't Cheap. Witchcraft 4. And he wrote Witchcraft 5. Fantastic.
Wow, that's a resume. Yeah. We'll just put it that way.
He did an American dark comedy crime drama. He wrote, directed, and produced 8 episodes of something called Great Kills. So yeah, okay. The one thing everyone knows him for is fucking SLC Punk.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's best known for this. The film centers around Steve-O Levy, a college graduate punk living in Salt Lake City during the mid-1980s. SLC Punk was chosen as the opening night feature at the 1999 Sundance Film Festival. Marandino created the film based on his experiences growing up in Salt Lake City. Although the film is not autobiographical, Marandino has said that many characters were based on people he knew. This thing made less than $300,000 at the box office. It's got a killer soundtrack, and I think that's how I knew about it. It has a 62% on Rotten Tomatoes, merging anarchic spirit with straightforward melodrama. SLC Punk is a hit-and-miss odyssey of youthful rebellion, elevated by Matthew Lillard's dramatically potent star turn. Metacritic assigned the film a weighted score of 50 out of 100 based on 21 critics, indicating mixture average. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave it 3 out of 4 stars, praising Lillard's performance and writing that the film offers a little something there for all of us. Janet Maslin, writing for the New York Times, called the film likable for its outlandishness, less so when it shows a self-important streak. And Dennis Harvey of Variety called it energetic but poorly structured. Yeah, this is literally a TikTok live stream. Mm-hmm. That's all this is. This is a TikTok live stream writ large. This is a couple of days in the life of these 2 punk rock guys, Matthew Lillard, Steve-O, and his buddy and I'll get to it in a minute, but Michael Gorgon's heroin Bob, who did not use heroin, which I think is hilarious. But it's these two friends. This is after Matthew Lillard graduated from college, and he's got yuppie rich parents who indulge him. And he has
Shooter
decided,
McGavin.
Yeah, and he has decided that he will spend his postgraduate years being an anarchist, being, all systems of government are full of shit, so I will be outside the systems and I will create chaos. And he is deeply embedded in the punk rock scene. And so the movie is literally like a travel guide through Salt Lake City punk. Here are the different groups. Here are the subgenres. Here are the people that we war with. Here are the people that are after us. Here are our friends. Here are our enemies. Here's where we party. Here's where we watch music, listen to music. Here's where we bang girls. There's some personal tragedy and trauma. We meet Bob's dad, and we suddenly now realize why Bob is the way that Bob is. And about 2/3 of the way through the movie, there are two distinct things that happen to Matthew Lillard's character, because up to this point, all he's doing is doing a travelogue.
Yeah, he's just...
That's it. There's no plot to the movie.
Right.
But he has two exchanges that kind of make him question things. One is he goes to a party and he meets the woman he's going to marry, who says to him, and I actually wrote this down because I did not want to fuck it up like I normally do. They're talking about why he is what he is, and he is rebelling. And she says to him, "Wouldn't it be more of an act of rebellion if you didn't spend so much time buying the blue hair dye and going out to get punky clothes? It seems so petty. Stop me if I'm being offensive. You want to be an individual, right? You look like you're wearing a uniform. You look like a punk. That's not rebellion. That's fashion."
Yeah,
I
buddy.
immediately sent that scene to my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, be authentic. That's all I ask. I think that got misinterpreted when I talked about it on TikTok. Like, it's not that I worry about her being a poser. I just be authentic. Know why you're doing things.
Yeah.
If this is what you believe in, do it. If you're just doing it because it seems cool to you, that is the very definition of shallow and vapid for me. And it's not that like I want my daughter to be cooler than the other side of the pillow. It's that I want her to be an authentic, free-thinking, critical thinking individual. I want her to be a functional adult. I'm trying to parent, Jesse. I'm just trying to parent.
I understand.
That seems to have been lost on people, but I digress. So there's that. And then he gets to a point of feeling listless, like nothing that we're doing matters. And then he's like, there's no way to affect change from the from the hinterlands of Salt Lake City. We have to go where the greatest change can be affected. And Bob says to him, "But this is my home and I like it here."
Well, yeah. And I was going to say, Bob would have been with him for that ride at the beginning of this movie.
Right. But what screws up every paradise is some broad.
I had a feeling you were going to react like that.
It's always a girl, Jesse, that ruins everything.
I had a feeling. Yeah.
And so, that's at that point, Matthew Lillard just sort of throw his hands up. But what really sends Matthew Lillard over the edge is when Bob dies.
Yeah.
Bob dies of an accidental drug overdose. He's not feeling well. He's not in the best of health, and he's given unknown medication by a person, whose heart was in the right place, but never give anybody else your drugs because you don't know what it is you're taking and you don't know what it is you're giving.
Nor take so many at a time.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yes, take the medication as prescribed. And so Bob dies of an accidental overdose, and I'm gonna stop smiling or looking off to see what the score is of the Pacers next game to really this is the thing I really want to talk about more so than anything else, because we could sit here for another hour talking about like sort of the punk rock ethos of this thing, and the message behind the movie is basically saying, don't be an outsider, be an insider, and fight from within. That's the whole point of the movie. It takes years to get there, but we finally do.
I was going to say, yeah.
But the thing that at almost 49 years of age, after these many years of being who I am, the thing that really got to me, and it got to me back then, but more so now, is Matthew Lillard crying over his friend. And all of that talk about punks and mods and Nazis and rebelling and fighting back and selling out dissipates. And all that's left is
He lost his friend.
I lost my friend.
Right.
You know, again, I made great friends with this. I made you, Robert, Bailey, Andrew, David, Alexis, I swear to God, Sean, the two Seans, Dorian, Mick, Jason. Jason's gonna be mad I didn't say him third. Ronnie's gonna be mad I didn't say him third. You know,
Oh shit.
Evan, Christian. You know, I met such great friends throughout the process of doing this. And I think that's why I over empathize with that scene. To suddenly lose a friend, you know, that you're close with, and feeling like at least somebody got you,
Right.
and then they're gone.
Right.
That scene always breaks my heart, and I'm crying now because I'm talking and I'm able to kind of express myself and move past it. But when I watched it this last time, and then I watched it, you know, a couple of days ago in preparation for this podcast again, I bawled at that scene. That scene absolutely crushes me. And I know Matthew Lillard doesn't get the world's most respect as an actor, you know, being the goofy guy from Scream and the goofy and Shaggy in the Scooby-Doo movies and whatnot, but hell of an actor. Really emotes in that scene. And him just like face distorted, screaming, I don't have a friend. Singular. I need a minute. It breaks my heart in a million pieces every time I watch that scene. It is rough to get through, and I over empathize with Matthew Lillard, Steve-O in that scene.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as we progress through the movie and as we reach toward this, you know, again, just like you said, it's a travel log. Here's all my friends. This is my place. This is where I belong. And these are all my buddies. And look at us. We're having a good time. We're throwing a party. And I don't know how many parties we get to watch him throw, but as we
so many parties.
Right. So many punk songs, so many parties. And we get to meet all of his friends. And then what happens, and this is, you know, it's indicative of life, unfortunately, is that as you start to grow older, things start to change. Mike, you know, the hardcore guy that was like straight laced, you know, had the glasses on.
Jason Segel's character.
Yeah, the guy that if he had a bass in his hand and he was coming out, the mosh pit was going to explode. That's kind of what that's kind of, he just looked all straight laced. And then he sits down and he's like, yeah, guys, I'm going to Notre Dame. I think that's where he was going. And I'm going to be, I'm going to work as a plant. I want to go to love plants, I think is what they were saying, or something like that. But,
I want to save the rainforest.
Yeah. So he's gone. He's now lost of the trio that we're kind of the main trio here. Mm-hmm. Well, 1/3 of them just left.
Right.
Heroin Bob throughout this whole movie, you start to realize he, just like you said, he finds a love interest and things start to change for him. Yep. Because he's found love. And then, of course, the horrible thing happens.
That is always the way. We are brothers until you find a woman, and then we are not so brothers.
Yep. And he, unfortunately, just like you said, he takes these pills and he dies, and then Matthew Lillard finds him the next day, and he realizes he's alone. And I think what's crushing him, number one, obviously the death of his friend, but number two is also the fact that he realizes, okay, he doesn't know what's next for him, other than the fact that it might be a situation where he's going to have to shave his mohawk, and he's going to have to conform. And just like you said, he may be going on the inside and trying to change it from within. But I think that really struck him also, is that now I have nobody to do this with, nobody to kind of be like my North Star to or my ride or die in this punk lifestyle. It's not there anymore. What else do I have left? The rebellion is over.
But I like what Matthew Lillard, so Matthew Lillard finally says at the end, like, so I became a lawyer. We always knew this was what was going to happen. At some point, Woodstock ends and everyone has to go home.
Right.
The party is over. And he was like, but, so I'll become a lawyer and I'll make life hell for judges, and I'll fight from the inside. I'll fight for the little guy. I don't have to stop being who I am. I mean, Jesse, I left trying to become a professional writer, and I went into social work. All punk rocky and angsty and angry and, and damn the man. And here I am. And I've stayed with social work for over 20 years. And, and every day I'm guided by the idea of people don't always have a voice to speak for them. So I can be that voice.
Right.
I can't, the world is too big. The structures are too strong. I can't fight these things by myself, but I can help. There are places I can help, and that's really all anyone ever wants of me, all anyone ever needs of me, and I'm okay with that. And that's the place that he gets to by the end of the movie. And I think of all three of these, it's the most hopeful. I also think it's the most realistic.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give you that. I mean, we get to see, I liken this to like, okay, SFW was what happens after a devastating tragedy. And how somebody has to try and deal with. Granted, there's some spectacular aspects of that where, he has to deal with society believing he's a celebrity. But regardless, he has to deal with that tragedy in some way. Here, SLC Punk is kind of like that lead up. All the good times that, you could possibly, granted, SFW is more the grunge era. And our buddy here, oh my goodness, Steve-O, 1985 punk era, but you could almost take those characters and make them one and just have, merge this story in some way where it's a situation where they come up to a tragedy and it changes them irrevocably in some way.
Yeah.
So I feel like both of them say something about an event that makes you grow up. You hit a point where all the partying is done now and you have to do something to move forward. And a lot of times, unfortunately, in both these movies, it's a tragic moment. But,
I think another common thread through all three of these movies is anarchy and nihilism are dead end streets.
Okay.
And Steve-O says it, as plain as day in SLC Punk. He was like, nothing is to be gained from anarchy. Anarchy, I think, is also lazy thinking. We organize ourselves into structures and societies because that's how we survive. That's how we live. It's also the most fulfilling. When you think about like, purpose-driven lives and, and why we're the happiest when we have a reason to get up in the morning and we have purpose.
Something to do. And
him wandering around SLC with no purpose and nothing to believe in and no structures, no goals, no anything. And he's not satisfied and he's unfulfilled. And then Bob's like, I'm fine with this. This is fine. And he's like, I can't do this anymore. I have to move on. And then Bob dies, as if like he needed any further like kick in the pants.
Right.
But I don't think I liked SLC Punk as much back then when I first saw it as I do now. I love Pump Up the Volume. I've always loved Pump Up the Volume. I love SLC Punk now as a middle-aged adult than I did as a kid because I've lived. Right. I've lived a hard, as hard a life as one can live in the circumstances I have. I'm not like a starving kid in Africa or anything like that, but I have had some interesting things happen to me, like losing a bet.
Oh no! Oh man.
Pat told me to bet on the Pacers. It's his fault.
Give him a hard time.
Totally shirked my responsibilities. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you talked about how you had lived back in the day. If you would have watched this, if I would have watched this in the 90s, I probably wouldn't have identified anywhere near as much as I did today with what he went through. This
is definitely one of those movies. And I talked about this with a different movie earlier this year where Jonas didn't quite get it as much. And I was like, you had to have lived a life for this to have affected you the way that it affected me. And you're 11. You have so much life ahead of you.
Yeah.
Hopefully better than the one I've lived. And then like SFW, I think I always liked the soundtrack. I don't think I ever liked the movie, and I still don't. But I think it's a worthy conversation piece, and so I think it was worth a rewatch just to see how I'd feel about it. And now that I have, I don't need to continue with this exercise any further.
Okay.
I will give you the last word as a summation of all these movies and this experience talking about it with me.
Well, we got to do one thing here before we do that, and that is I want to run down the soundtrack and I want to get your opinion.
Okay.
All right, you love the soundtrack, but I'm not the Punk guy, so if you got any commentary, throw it out there. The Suicide Machines. I Never Promised You a Rose Garden.
It's a good song.
All right. The Exploited. Sex and Violence, 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 over and over and over again.
That's a classic.
All right, then. Fear 3. I Love Living in the City.
Oh my God, that's like a punk anthem.
Okay.
I actually saw Fear open up for Metallica in 1989 at the Nassau Coliseum. No, I saw Fear last summer, and I don't remember which concert it was at the fairgrounds, because I'd seen a bunch I saw a bunch last year and the year before. But Fear opened up, and like, dude, like, I Love Living in the City. They're like 900 years old, but they can still bang that one out.
That's great. That's great. The Stooges, 1969.
Yeah.
The Specials, Too Hot.
Mm-hmm.
This is a band that really has needs no introduction. That's the Ramones, Cretin Hop. Then we have Blondie with Dreaming.
Yep.
Generation X, Kiss Me Deadly, which I assume is a cover. Or maybe not. I don't know. But then we have the Velvet Underground with Rock and Roll. Moondog with Gasoline Rain. Fifi, Mirror in the Bathroom. The Adolescents with Amoeba, and Dead Kennedys, Kill the Poor.
So, kill the poor. We gotta kill the poor. It's a quality song right there.
Good stuff. I think as far as like my notes for SLC Punk, and there's only a couple things that kind of stood out. First off, Mark, is there any like precedent with an infection turning into a virus?
Yes.
Because, okay, I was like, I mean, they looked at it after he bashed his hand in the mirror, and then of course didn't get medical treatment. And they look at it, and then they have to quarantine him. I'm like, really? For an infection? I didn't know it could mutate into a virus. That's scary.
Yeah.
All right, then. Like I said, I loved the fact that Shooter McGavin was his dad. I don't know what the actor's real name is, but we're probably going to see him again here in Happy Gilmore too. But I love how he's like, they protested Vietnam, and they have a sit down talk with Steve-O. Steve-O's got and he looks at he goes, I really do appreciate, or I can appreciate what you're trying to do with the Native American hair thing.
It was like the pinnacle of like liberal parenting.
Yeah.
Like, we see you, we understand.
Yep.
Fine.
Yeah, a lot of beat downs happen in this thing. The punks fighting the rednecks and the mods, and I mean, just like you said, these are the class of stuff that, I mean, just when I would have never known. Of course, this is 1985. We got to remember. I love our beginning story about the kid who's running through with like 100 hits of acid in his pockets, and he goes
Let
through
me
the
tell you how, like, when I watched it as a kid, that kid always stood. Like, he was always so funny to me, but also like. So I have been around people who drop acid. I have been offered acid. I have never done it, and that's the reason why.
That scared you?
Scared straight. I have heard people say, like, you drop a tab of acid, it's not going to kill you. It's not going to affect your children. I'm like, I don't need to take a chance, and I'm going to turn out like that kid.
And that's another
thing.
Wearing
a fucking tinfoil raincoat, or whatever the hell he was wearing.
And then, back then I would have thought that was funny, the fact the story was humorous, but what really like kind of brings it back down to earth is when he runs into the kid on the streets, like, a month or so later, and he's homeless. And he realized, I think that starts the gears turning, like he walked away. I remember him saying that in the movie. He said he felt bad because, he walked away from him. Afterwards, and he said normally he wouldn't turn his back on him, but something made him turn his back that day. So anyway, as far as we talked about the end of this and him shaving his head and going, I love the fact that he's going to try and change things within. This was a big learning experience for Steve-O's, for Steve-O, and to where he was going in life. And as we're teenagers or 20-year-olds, we don't know what the hell we're going to do.
Well, it's the maturation from arrested adolescent to adulthood.
Right.
We watch the maturation process in real time.
Yeah. But I enjoyed what I wrote. My daughter made sure that I had to get on here and say that she absolutely loves Matthew Lillard. And I said, hey, what'd you think of this movie? She says, it was the best one you've ever shown me. And I said,
Nice.
is that because Matthew Lillard's in it? And I think that was probably the influencing factor here.
Well, I will say this. You're welcome.
But yeah, as far as a trilogy, Rebellion definitely in spades throughout this thing. You can pick it out, see it, and you could definitely learn a few things watching this, and it definitely hits a lot harder as a 47-year-old for myself than it would have as a 20-year-old.
So Jesse, we've got a couple of these throughout the next couple of months. I just sat at work one day and like, there's so many movies that like I want to talk about that because they're not because I was only talking about movies connected to stuff going on at Damn You Hollywood, and I'm like, I just don't have I'm gonna bore myself out of wanting to do this at all. And I said, it's not podcast. It's not that I hate podcasting. It's what I'm podcasting about that I hate.
Nope. The subject matter. Yep.
Yeah. And sometimes who I'm doing it with. So I was like, you know what? Jesse's a dependable, good conversation. And I can't get you to go to the movies, but I can get you to watch movies at home. So I'm like, he is the perfect guy to talk about this stuff with. So I got a couple of these lined up for us of just things I want to talk about, things I want to share with you, things I think you would find interesting, stuff from a previous conversation. Like I did an entire triple feature based on us trying to figure out where No Big Deal came from.
I remember, and I saw this in here, and I was like, I know that's why he put that in here. That's
exactly why. Yeah, that I chat GPT, and I'm just like, chat GPT, Jesse and I had a prolonged conversation about the song No Big Deal. What the hell movie am I thinking of?
Here's the transcript, and please narrow it down for me.
Yeah. So that's that. But I really enjoyed this, Jesse, and I'm looking forward to more conversations with you about the subject matters. Tomorrow, Damn You Hollywood is back. It'll be myself and Robert, and we will be talking Mission Impossible, Final Reckoning. It's currently my favorite movie of the year. It passed Nana's. I absolutely, I'll talk more about this tomorrow, but I absolutely fucking love Mission Impossible. Not since Endgame have I enjoyed the final chapter of any movie franchise I've seen in the past decade. Yeah.
Oh boy.
And this is entirely like, if you like the Mission Impossible movies, you'll love Final Reckoning. If you're like not a fan, okay. I don't. Yeah. There's stuff here, but you kind of have like my son's reaction. My son said the most Robert Winfrey thing of all. He was like, "I'm having a hard time suspending my disbelief with these movies," and I'm like, "Well, I've lost you."
How old is he? Because it's going to be a long time.
11. I was like, "Welcome to the dark side. Your grandfather and Robert are waiting for you. I can't help you. I'll be waiting for you back on the light side when you finally deal with all of this."
At some point, my grandpa, I remember, would not watch a sitcom because it was he just believed it was a laugh track all the time, and because of that, he couldn't suspend his disbelief anymore, and he stopped watching comedies.
Yep. Yeah, it's harder and harder to talk to my dad about movies because they're just like, this wouldn't happen in real life, and I'm like, it's a fucking movie. Anyway, so that's tomorrow. Tuesday, to continue to pay for her sins, Alexis Haynes will host My Two Children. And
we make a song about her. We're going. You're still in debt here. You still.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, she was paroled, but she's still on probation. So she'll be doing an on-trial civil court edition. We're looking at the 2002 Lilo and Stitch versus the live-action Lilo and Stitch. I will not be on that show. I don't want to be bothered. But it was originally supposed to be her and Dorian and my two kids, so she'd have some backup. Zach might show up. Who knows? But if nothing else, it'll be her and my two kids, and I have warned them both. I said, you can abuse Alexis, but you also have to make sure the show is good. So they got their marching orders.
There you go.
And they always come back to the fold, Jesse. They always come back to the fold. Sean Comer is back from his hiatus. We'll be doing Long Road to Ruin, The Karate Kid. Pat might be joining us. Who knows?
Wow.
I can't say if people are going to show up to podcasts or not these days, other than you and Robert. So, this past week, speaking of which, we did a Crowbot. We did a Metal Hammer of Doom jukebox. We talked about Crowbot. We reviewed Final Destination Bloodlines. Alexis reviewed Andor. Alexis and I reviewed Apple Cider Vinegar, which worth a watch. You and Mindy should watch it. I bet you'll like it. Okay. Last Thursday, myself and Mik, who was supposed to be here tonight but she couldn't make it, We did the parenting, control freak in Holland. So, gave her horror fix. And then this past Saturday, myself and Evan Bevins did a comic strip for The Surrogates as we work our way through many an independent graphic novel that was turned into a movie nobody saw. Fantastic. Now, honestly, like if you haven't read The Surrogates, you really should. Since you're like the AI robot, science fiction guy. It doesn't get much better than Surrogates. Surrogates was fantastic. Like the book, the movie is neither here nor there. But the book is absolutely like I don't tell you what comic books to read. Generally speaking, you're the comic book guy, not me. But because I know you. I walked with you once upon a dream. You should read. You, Jesse Starcher.
That's something that would speak to me, huh?
You, Jesse Aloysius Starcher, should read The Surrogates by Robert Venditti.
Duly noted.
Speaking of comic books, why don't you tell us about it, Chief?
Oh my goodness. Well, me and you tomorrow are going to be discussing the third volume, finishing out that prequel, heading back to Charming, Sons of Anarchy, the Redwood original series. And yeah, we're going to be talking the third volume of that. What does Jax and Opie have in store for us? Is Jax going to be a prospect? Is Opie going to be a prospect? Oh man, you can tune in and check that out and see where all that goes. That's going to be a good time. We also have previously this past Monday on the 19th, myself and Chris Armstrong got together and discussed TMNT 3, the comic book adaptation of the Turtles movie, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. It was a lot of fun. We had a good time, commiserating pretty much because it was not a good movie. We compared the comic to the movie. Very similar to comic stripped, except we're actually taking the adaptation of the comic, adaptation of the movie comic form.
Did you see SLC Punk has a comic?
Does it really?
Yeah, I read that in the wiki. And I thought about you, and I wanted to make sure I mentioned it. In 1998, SLC Punk was adapted into a comic book illustrated by Dean Hashpiel.
Well, I'll have to keep that in mind. That's interesting.
There you go. You can talk about it on your own show now.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you see the SLC Punk has a sequel?
Yes.
I just couldn't believe that. Anyway, I think it was like
no earthly urge to talk about it.
Yeah, it's 2012. So yeah. Anyway, Steve-O and his, as he goes to law school. I don't think that's what it is. We don't need any more.
No.
Then I think that's about it. You could hear myself and Evan Bevins discussing Marvel Snap, which is a mobile game, and we release usually about 4 or 5 episodes a month. I do want to give a shout out to Kapow, the Pop Culture Podcast. I wasn't able to be on it, but I did participate in the Summer Box Office Movie Challenge. So you can hear my picks over there. He, the Grand Poobah's got a big game that he does, and if you nail where these movies are going to be between Memorial Day and Labor Day, where they're going to be as far as like top 10, you get a certain amount of points. I won the first year. The second year, I got all screwed up in regards to the dates, and I was picking stuff. Well, let's try that again. I wasn't picking things that were releasing that made big numbers because I thought it was outside of the date range. And so I lost like big time. Now this year I told him, I said, I'm coming back with a vengeance. And Mission Impossible, by the way, I have as number 7 on the box office challenge.
It did well. Like both that and Lilo and Stitch did massive numbers Memorial Day weekend. But Lilo and Stitch is fast tracking to $1 billion.
I've got that at number 3. And I'm really starting to wonder. I'm hoping I have How to Train Your Dragon.
I was going to say, Lilo and Stitch made more in one weekend than most movies have made all year.
Yeah, dude, I figure so. I imagine, so I have How to Train Your Dragon at number 2, and I'm really banking on like some franchise nostalgia there. It's not, I don't know if it's.
Well, I would have said Superman until they gave it away for fucking free on Amazon.
Did they?
Were you not paying attention to the chat earlier? Where they're doing like an Amazon screening?
No, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know why.
Wow.
So yeah, between like that and the Fantastic Four reshoots, I'm like, oh, this isn't looking good at all.
I'm gonna have to send a message to those guys because I got Superman at number 1. That's gonna hurt. And I know a few other guys do too. Well, anyway, so yeah, go over to Kapow, the Pop Culture Podcast. Check that out. Just released, I think, a couple days ago. So you can hear our discussion. And then, of course, at the end of the summer, we're going to be coming back and talking about how well I did. That's right. Knock on wood and all that stuff. I'm very confident.
All right. Well, you have a great Memorial Day weekend. It was great talking to you, Jesse.
Absolutely. You as well, Mark. I'm glad we got to get there and do that.
Get her done.
Get her done.
All right, for Jesse the Cable Guy, I just bit into a piece of pepper, I think. Be well, be so punk rock. Be well, be safe, and behave.